Captain Dern Rydell had a face like a worn-out boot and a personality to match. He stood at the helm of the Rust Bucket, which was both a metaphor and the ship's actual name. "Welcome to today's episode of Why Are We Still Alive?" he announced, his tone dripping with the enthusiasm of a man who'd seen too much and cared too little. The bridge was a mess of blinking lights, flickering screens, and a coffee machine that looked more like a war crime than an appliance. Vesa Kor, the tech specialist, was buried under a console, fighting a losing battle with an ancient wiring system. Her hands were blackened with grease, and her patience was running thin. "You know," Vesa called out from under the console, her voice muffled, "when I signed up for space exploration, I thought it would involve less duct tape and more exploring. And when I signed up for this gig, I thought I'd have a ship that didn't double as a tetanus farm," Dern shot back, smirking. "Seems we both got the short end of the cosmic stick." The Rust Bucket trembled as it exited hyperspace, throwing Vesa off balance. She cursed, loudly and creatively, as she banged her head against the console. "Today, on Why We Don't Touch Anything," Dern muttered, "we arrive at the Galactic Arena." The arena wasn't on any official maps, which usually meant it was exactly the kind of place you didn't want to be. It was said to be the remnants of an ancient civilization, a gathering place for beings who were supposedly more advanced than the average toaster. Of course, Dern and his crew were here not because they were curious historians, but because the captain owed money to people who weren't known for their forgiveness. "You ever wonder," Dern mused, staring at the looming structure on the view screen, "why all the ancient civilizations leave their crap floating around?" "Artifacts," Dern, Vesa corrected, finally extracting herself from the console with a triumphant flourish. "They're called artifacts, and maybe they leave them because they're dead, or just moved on to a nicer part of the universe," Dern suggested. "Where the drinks are colder and the locals don't shoot on sight." Vesa joined him at the front, peering at the arena. It was a sprawling mass of metal and stone, like someone had mashed together a cathedral and a scrapyard, and then left it to rust for a few millennia. "Well, it beats the usual sights," Vesa said with a shrug. "And by usual, I mean endless void and occasional asteroids." "High praise," Dern grunted. "Let's see what the locals left us. Maybe a fancy toaster." The Rust Bucket maneuvered closer, its thrusters wheezing in protest like an asthmatic elephant. Vesa ran a scan, her fingers dancing over the controls with a familiarity that bordered on the obscene. Getting some energy readings, she reported. "Nothing that screams giant death ray. But then again, this is space." "It's probably just quiet, or holding its breath," Dern muttered. The docking was as smooth as one could hope for when everything on the ship seemed to be held together by hope and duct tape. The airlock hissed open, and the two explorers stepped out onto the cold metal of the arena. "Don't you love that new planet smell?" Vesa joked, her boots clanging against the ancient floor. "Like rust and missed opportunities, and perhaps a hint of doom," Dern added, his hand resting on the grip of his blaster, as if it could ward off bad decisions. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever, a maze of passages lined with bizarre glyphs and doors that led to nowhere. The arena felt like a labyrinth designed by someone who thought instructions were optional. "You ever get the feeling you're being watched?" Vesa asked, her voice echoing in the empty halls. "Every day of my life," Dern replied, "usually by creditors." They reached what looked like the control room, or maybe it was just the nicest pile of junk in this cosmic heap. Screens flickered to life as they entered, casting a ghostly glow over everything. "Looks like someone left the lights on," Vesa said, her tone half amused, half wary. "Bet their electric bill's a killer." A console in the center of the room hummed to life, ancient technology springing back into action with the enthusiasm of a long-retired soldier hearing the call of battle once more. "What do you think this does?" Vesa asked, already reaching for the controls. "Hopefully not self-destruct," Dern replied. "Or endless loop of elevator music." Vesa's fingers danced over the console, her curiosity getting the better of her common sense. Lights flared, Alarms chirped, and somewhere deep within the arena, something old and powerful stirred. Vesa, Dern warned as the ground beneath them started to tremble. Tell me we're not waking up anything that prefers its visitors medium rare. Just a little cosmic alarm clock, Vesa replied, trying for levity while her eyes scanned the readouts. It'll probably hit snooze and go back to bed. But the arena had other ideas. The whole structure seemed to shudder, like a beast waking from a long slumber, groggy and ill-tempered. The lights dimmed, then flared, casting bizarre shadows that danced across the walls. Well, that's not ominous, Dern muttered, reaching for his blaster. I think I might have accidentally turned on the mood lighting, Vesa said, her smile strained. Either that or we just pissed off a cosmic entity, Dern replied. And let's be real, our luck's not great. A low rumble filled the air, growing steadily louder, a sound that spoke of power, age, and a distinct lack of fondness for trespassers. Vesa, whatever you did, maybe do it backwards, Dern suggested, his voice tight with the kind of tension that usually preceded an explosion. I think we've officially entered oops territory, Vesa admitted, frantically working the console. The arena groaned, metal creaking as if flexing long unused muscles, and a voice, ancient and inscrutable, echoed through the halls. You're awake, Vesa said, half in awe, half in terror. Didn't even bring breakfast, Dern added. Worst guests ever. The cosmic entity didn't seem to share their appreciation for sarcasm. The arena's lights pulsed, mirroring a heartbeat, each throb resonating through their bones. Captain, this might be a good time to run, Vesa suggested, already inching towards the exit. Dern didn't need to be told twice. Agreed. Let's leave before it decides to ask about our intentions. They fled the control room, the sound of ancient machinery echoing behind them like a chorus of disapproving ancestors. The corridors blurred past, a confusing tangle that seemed to actively resist their escape. You know, for an ancient relic, this place runs pretty well, Dern panted as they took a sharp turn, nearly colliding with a wall. Too well, Vesa replied. I'm starting to think it has a mind of its own, or it's just really happy to see us, Dern quipped. The arena shook violently, sending them sprawling across the floor. Electrical discharges crackled along the walls, blue sparks dancing like malevolent fireflies. Maybe it's trying to tell us something, Vesa said, trying to pull herself up. Yeah, like get out, Dern replied. And I'm inclined to listen. They stumbled onwards, the ship's airlock finally coming into view, a promise of safety in a world gone mad. You know, for a place called the arena, this feels more like a madhouse, Vesa gasped, her lungs burning, or a death trap, Dern agreed. Pick your poison. They reached the rust bucket, and as the airlock sealed behind them, the arena's lights flared one last time, bathing the ship in an eerie glow. Well, that was fun, Vesa said, collapsing into her seat on the bridge. If by fun you mean terrifying, Dern countered, then yeah, a blast. The rust bucket disengaged from the arena, the ship's thrusters flaring as it pulled away. The arena shrank behind them, returning to its slumber, or whatever cosmic equivalent it had. What do you think that was? Vesa asked, watching the relic fade into the background of stars. Ancient security system, cosmic watchdog. Bad idea, Dern scratched his chin. Take your pick. Well, at least we know one thing, Vesa said, an eyebrow raised. What's that? We're definitely not archaeologists, she replied with a grin. Dern let out a bark of laughter. True. Though it seems we're pretty good at waking up the dead. As the stars stretched out before them, the rust bucket continued its journey, leaving behind the mystery of the arena and the entity they had inadvertently awakened. Captain, Vesa said, turning serious, what if it follows us? Dern shrugged. Then we'll cross that bridge when it blasts us. Until then, let's put some distance between us and that waking nightmare. The ship sped into the void, the arena a distant memory, but the sense of something ancient and powerful lingering just at the edge of their thoughts, like an itch they couldn't scratch, or a shadow they couldn't shake. And somewhere in the depths of space, the arena waited, its secrets hidden, its entity awake, pondering the new players who had dared to disturb its slumber. The rust bucket rattled through space, a testament to human engineering, or maybe just stubbornness. Inside, Vesa was hunched over the console, her fingers dancing across the keys with the kind of speed that made you wonder if she had caffeine instead of blood. Dern, on the other hand, seemed to think worrying was an Olympic sport and he was going for gold. "Think we upset the universe's landlord," Dern grumbled, slouching into the captain's chair like a sulky teenager. "If we did, I doubt we'll get our deposit back," Vesa shot back, not looking up from her work. Her brow furrowed and her fingers paused. Captain, you might want to see this." Dern leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the readout. It was a lovely little list of doom, gravitational anomalies, electromagnetic disturbances, and a charming note that read simply, "Run." "Well, isn't that just peachy?" Dern muttered. "So what's causing it? The universe's worst hangover," Vesa shrugged. "Could be. Or the ancient version of a cosmic goodbye party. We did wake something up, remember? You don't say. And here I thought the shaking walls and ominous lights were a new local custom." The ship lurched, as if agreeing with Dern's sarcasm, and Vesa clung to the console. "I think we've got a storm brewing." "Fantastic. Let's add a space hurricane to our list of catastrophes." Right between angry cosmic entity and broken coffee machine, Vesa punched a few buttons, trying to stabilize their course. "Do me a favor, Captain. Next time you decide to wake up something ancient, bring a bigger hammer." "You know our budget doesn't allow for bigger hammers," Dern replied. "Or any good decisions, really." The rust bucket shuddered again and an alarm began to blare, a high-pitched wail that suggested something was either on fire or about to be. "That can't be good," Vesa noted almost cheerfully as she moved to another console. "Can you stop pretending everything's fine?" Dern snapped. Vesa looked up, a smirk playing on her lips. "If I did that, I'd have to acknowledge how screwed we are." "Fair point," Dern admitted. "Any chance we're just overreacting? Maybe it's a polite cosmic entity." "Sure," Vesa said, rolling her eyes. "And maybe I'm a billionaire with a fully functioning spaceship." "A man can dream," Dern sighed. "All right, what do we do about this mess?" Vesa tapped at the console, her expression more focused than usual. "We could try to outrun it." "And run where?" "Into the arms of our creditors, into a black hole. Hell, I'd take either over whatever this is." Vesa stopped typing, staring at the screen. "There's something else, Captain, I think. I think it's following us." Dern's face twisted into something halfway between disbelief and resignation. "Of course it is. Maybe it wants to swap recipes." The ship trembled again and the lights flickered ominously. Even the coffee machine in the corner seemed to cough in protest. "All right, let's say it's following us," Dern said, pacing the small bridge. "What does it want? Our charming personalities, our lively conversation? Maybe it wants us to turn it off. You know, stop poking its buttons." "Well, too late for that," Dern groaned. "And if it has a kill switch, I left it in my other pants." Vesa shook her head, an exasperated chuckle escaping her lips. "Okay, let's try logic. We woke it up, right?" "Right. So maybe we can put it back to sleep," Vesa suggested, though the skepticism in her voice was palpable. "Like singing a lullaby." "A really loud, possibly explosive lullaby." Dern rubbed his temples, trying to soothe the headache that was forming. "And how do you propose we do that? Read it bedtime stories, offer it herbal tea?" Vesa shrugged again. "Maybe we need to go back." "Go back?" Dern echoed, disbelief thick in his voice. "Are you insane? That thing's as welcome as a skunk at a garden party." "Yeah, but maybe it wants something from the arena, or maybe it's like one of those cats that just wants to be let outside again." Dern sighed, though he couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "All right, fine. Let's head back to the cosmic joyride. Just don't expect me to like it." The rust bucket groaned in agreement, its engines protesting as Vesa adjusted their course back towards the arena. "You really think this'll work?" Dern asked, a hint of hope, or was it desperation, in his voice. "Honestly," Vesa said, her tone as dry as a desert planet, "I think we're screwed either way. But at least this way we can pretend we have a plan." "The audacity of pretending," Dern chuckled. "All right then. Let's pretend we're not flying straight into our own funeral. With the arena growing larger on the view screen, the rust bucket powered forward, its crew doomed, determined, and just cynical enough to think they might survive. The cosmic storm raged around them, a maelstrom of swirling energies and gravitational chaos, like a tantrum thrown by the universe itself. The ship shuddered, metal groaning under the strain, but it held together, more out of spite than structural integrity. "Feels like we're on a roller coaster with a vendetta," Vesa said, holding onto the console as the ship dipped and lurched. "Can't imagine what the insurance on this ride would be," Dern replied, gripping his chair with white-knuckled resolve. "You sure we're not just flying into the mouth of doom?" "Pretty sure," Vesa replied. "But if we are, at least it's an interesting way to go." "I'll put that on my tombstone," Dern quipped. "Here lies Captain Dern Rydell died interestingly." The ship powered through the storm, the arena looming ahead like a sullen giant. Lights flickered across its surface, a pattern that seemed random but felt deliberate. As they approached, the lights pulsed, almost as if the structure itself was acknowledging their return. "Looks like it's rolling out the welcome mat," Vesa said. "Or maybe the sacrificial altar." "Hard to tell. Let's aim for welcome mat," Dern replied. "I'm not dressed for a sacrifice." They eased into the docking bay, the rust bucket settling with a creaky sigh that suggested even it was tired of this nonsense. The airlock hissed open, and the two stepped out once more onto the ancient metal floor. "Ready to charm the pants off an ancient entity?" Vesa asked, adjusting her gear. "Always," Dern replied, though his hand was already on his blaster. "Just in case it prefers a more aggressive negotiation." They made their way back through the labyrinth of corridors, the arena's oppressive silence broken only by the distant rumble of the storm outside. The control room awaited, its screens flickering with unreadable data and symbols that probably translated to abandon hope. "All right," Vesa said, stepping up to the console. "Let's see if we can calm down whatever we woke up." "Just don't press any big red buttons," Dern reminded her. "Those never end well." Vesa's fingers danced over the controls, a ballet of desperation and calculated risk. The screens responded, the room's lights dimming and then brightening, casting long shadows that seemed to leer at them. "You ever get the feeling the universe is laughing at us?" Dern asked, his voice low. "Constantly," Vesa replied, biting her lip as she worked. "But at least we're funny." The console beeped, a sound that was both promising and ominous. The screens flashed, symbols flickering and then resolving into something resembling a coherent message. "Got something," Vesa said, her voice tinged with triumph. "Is it asking for its morning coffee?" Dern joked. "More like its bedtime story," Vesa replied, eyes scanning the display. I think it just wants to go back to sleep." "Any idea how to do that?" Dern asked, hope creeping into his voice despite himself. Vesa nodded slowly. "I have a theory, but if it doesn't work we're probably going to need a bigger ship, or a bigger grave," Dern added grimly. "All right then, what's the plan?" Vesa took a deep breath. "We overload the system. Give it a power surge that tricks it into thinking it's nap time again." "Won't that fry us too?" Dern asked, though he already knew the answer. Vesa shrugged. "Probably, but it's either that or wait for it to decide we're toast." "Our options, crispy or burnt," Dern said, shaking his head. "I'm starting to think the universe hates us." "No argument here," Vesa agreed. "But let's try crispy first." She keyed in the sequence, the console beeping in what might have been approval or derision. The room hummed, a low vibration that resonated in their bones, and the lights flickered as if unsure whether to comply or rebel. "Now we wait," Vesa said, stepping back. Dern crossed his arms, watching the screens, the tension in the air as thick as molasses. "You ever wonder what makes us do this? What tempt fate, wake up ancient horrors?" Vesa replied, an ironic smile on her lips. "Yeah," Dern said, "seems like a bad hobby." "Maybe it's just the thrill," Vesa suggested. "Or maybe we're just idiots." "Both sound likely," Dern admitted with a chuckle. The arena groaned, metal shifting and settling, as if deciding whether to cooperate or crush them. Somewhere deep within they felt the entity's presence, a weight pressing down on their souls, a silent question hanging in the air. And then quietly the lights began to dim, the vibrations easing, the sense of malice fading into the background noise of the universe. The entity, it seemed, had accepted their offering. "Did we do it?" Dern asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Vesa nodded, a tired smile breaking through. "Looks like we managed to hit snooze." "Well, I'll be damned," Dern said, shaking his head. "Guess we're not dead yet." The rust bucket shuddered as if shaking off the remnants of the storm, and the screens on the console flickered one last time before going dark. "We should get out of here," Vesa said, "before it changes its mind." "Couldn't agree more," Dern replied. "I've had enough of ancient entities for one lifetime." They retraced their steps, the arena's corridors silent once more, and as they reached the ship, Dern paused, glancing back at the ancient structure. "You think it'll hold?" he asked, a hint of awe in his voice. "As long as we don't come back," Vesa replied. "And I plan to keep it that way." They boarded the rust bucket, the airlock sealing with a reassuring hiss, and as they powered away from the arena, Dern couldn't help but feel a little lighter, like they'd dodged a cosmic bullet. "Captain, what's next?" Vesa asked, settling into her seat. Dern thought for a moment, the vastness of space stretching out before them. "Let's find a quiet corner of the galaxy, somewhere we can fix the coffee machine." Vesa grinned. "Sounds like a plan." And as the rust bucket slipped into the stars, leaving behind the mystery and menace of the arena, Dern and Vesa shared a moment of silence, grateful for the chance to keep tempting fate another day. The rust bucket hummed along, as if trying to decide whether it should implode or hold itself together out of sheer spite. Inside, the cockpit crackled with static, the atmosphere thick with the kind of tension you could slice with a chainsaw. And given the state of their equipment, a chainsaw might actually have been more reliable. Captain Dern Rydell sat in his battered chair, rubbing his temples as if trying to massage away the universe's latest headache. "So, Vesa," he began, voice dripping with sardonic charm, "any chance that whatever we stirred up back there has decided to send us a thank you note for not letting it swallow us whole?" Vesa Kor, hunched over a console that looked like it belonged in a museum of regrettable technology, snorted. "If you count this constant static and random bursts of electromagnetic screeching as a thank you, then yeah, we're practically on its Christmas card list." "Well, isn't that just peachy?" Dern replied, eyeing the cobweb of wiring they euphemistically called systems. "Any chance you can translate its love letters into something a bit more useful?" "Working on it," Vesa said, fingers flying over the console with the kind of speed that suggested she'd like nothing more than to throttle it. "But it feels like trying to decipher a drunk historian's diary. Lots of random scribbles, not much sense." A particularly loud burst of static blared across the cockpit, making Dern wince. "Whatever it's saying, it sounds like it's got more issues than we do, and that's saying something." Vesa chuckled, though there was little humor in it. "Just think of it as cosmic karaoke. Horrible and off-key, but you can't stop listening." "Cosmic karaoke," Dern mused. "I can almost hear the universe laughing at us. Probably thinks we're a two-bit comedy act fumbling our way through its grand script." Vesa's console beeped, a small victory amidst the chaos. "Got something," she announced, tapping a few keys. "Looks like it's trying to communicate through our systems, and not in a hey, let's grab a coffee kind of way." Dern raised an eyebrow. "More like a I'm going to eat your soul kind of way." "Pretty much," Vesa confirmed, eyes on the screen. It's absorbing energy from the arena. If it keeps going, we're looking at a major destabilization." "Good to know the universe still has a sense of humor," Dern sighed. "So, what's the plan? How do we convince it to find a different snack bar?" Vesa leaned back, crossing her arms. "We need a way to disrupt the energy flow. Something that screams get off my lawn loud enough for it to hear." Dern scratched his chin, contemplating the cosmic absurdity of their situation. "We could try jamming the signal. But given our equipment's tendency to self-destruct at the slightest hint of competence, I'd say we're in for a bumpy ride. Or we could overload the arena remotely, Vesa suggested, her voice laced with a grim optimism. Flood it with power, mess up the entity's buffet. Dern nodded slowly. Sounds like a plan doomed to fail spectacularly. I like it. Vesa gave him a wry smile. High risk, low reward. Exactly our style. They set to work, the cockpit filled with an orchestra of frantic typing, mechanical groans, and the occasional curse. The ship shuddered as Vesa rerouted power, an undercurrent of tension vibrating through the metal. You ever think this is a stupid way to die? Dern asked, keeping his eyes fixed on the console. Going up against some ancient cosmic force armed with nothing but good intentions and shoddy tech. Stupid. Sure, Vesa replied, not missing a beat. But at least it'll be memorable. Here's hoping the afterlife has a sense of humor, Dern muttered, as systems flickered ominously. The rust bucket complained loudly but complied, a reluctant partner in their suicide mission. Energy crackled through the ship's veins, directed towards the arena like a punch thrown in the dark. Here goes nothing, Vesa said, initiating the overload. The ship quaked, lights flickering like they were caught in a cosmic disco. For a moment the universe held its breath, the static hiss of the entity's presence growing louder, more insistent. Then silence. Did it work? Dern asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vesa checked her screens, her expression shifting from hopeful to resigned. Well, it hasn't stopped trying to communicate, but I think we knocked it off balance, at least for now. So, in other words, we've bought ourselves some time, Dern replied, sinking back into his chair with a mix of relief and exhaustion. For now, Vesa confirmed, though her eyes were already scanning for the next problem. But this thing's not done with us yet. Then let's hope we're done with it before it gets too hungry, Dern said, the weight of their predicament settling back over him like an old, unwelcome blanket. As the rust bucket drifted through the void, its crew still very much alive, at least for the moment. They couldn't help but feel like they were the universe's joke, the punchline still to be revealed. Captain, Vesa said, breaking the silence that had settled over them. You think there's any chance we can outrun this thing? Dern considered the question, knowing the answer was bleak. Outrun, no, but maybe we can outsmart it. I'm a big believer in the power of dumb luck. Dumb luck's got us this far, Vesa agreed, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. Might as well keep the faith. The static returned, a subtle, insidious presence like an itch they couldn't scratch. It was a reminder that the universe was far from done with them, and that somewhere out there, an ancient entity was still hungry. Looks like our friend is still singing, Dern commented, listening to the crackling chorus. Yep, and it's got a hell of a range, Vesa replied, her fingers dancing across the controls once more. Let's just hope it doesn't discover an encore. The rust bucket continued its lonely voyage through the cosmos, a battered ship helmed by a captain with a face like a worn-out boot and a tech specialist who could fix anything except her own luck. Together they faced the universe with stubborn tenacity and a healthy dose of sarcasm, determined to survive whatever cosmic joke fate had in store. As the ship's systems hummed along, Vesa decoded the entity's latest barrage of signals. According to this, it's not just feeding. It's looking to expand its menu. Great, Dern replied, rolling his eyes. Because dealing with a cosmic all-you-can-eat buffet wasn't enough stress for one day. Vesa paused, her expression serious. If it keeps feeding off the arena, it could destabilize the whole area, might even ripple out and affect other systems. Dern let out a low whistle. So we're not just looking at our own skins on the line. We're talking galactic consequences. Pretty much, Vesa said, her voice steady. No pressure, right? Just another day in paradise, Dern quipped, though his mind was racing. All right, so how do we become less appetizing? We need to disrupt its energy flow again, make it think twice about sticking around, Vesa replied, an edge of determination in her voice. Maybe even trick it into thinking this place is a trap. Or bait, Dern suggested, a glimmer of an idea forming. We could set up a decoy, something that looks more appealing than the arena. But how? Vesa asked, frowning. We're not exactly swimming in resources. Dern tapped his fingers on the console, thinking. We could simulate a bigger energy source, fake it until we make it, or until we break it, Vesa added, nodding. But it could work. The ship's alarms blared, a cacophony of warning signals that usually meant something was either on fire or about to be. Vesa moved quickly, fingers flying over the controls in a desperate ballet. "Looks like our friend is getting impatient," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "Then let's not keep it waiting," Dern replied, his tone resolute. They worked in tandem, the ship's systems a chaotic symphony of flashing lights and buzzing circuitry. The rust bucket groaned as its power was redirected, an unwilling participant in their desperate gambit. All around them the static grew louder, a voice that was both ancient and unknowable. It filled the cockpit, a chorus of chaos that threatened to drown them. "Got it!" Vesa shouted, her face a mask of fierce determination. Decoys up and running. The ship vibrated, a low hum reverberating through its hull as the simulated energy beacon flickered to life. It was a gamble, a desperate ploy to divert the entity's attention. "Here's hoping it has a taste for fiction," Dern said, crossing his fingers. They waited, the seconds stretching into an eternity as the entity's presence loomed. The static ebbed and flowed, a tide of uncertainty that kept them on edge. Then slowly the noise began to fade, retreating into the background like a nightmare dissipating with the dawn. "I think it's working," Vesa said, her relief palpable. Dern allowed himself a small smile. "We've bought ourselves some time. Now we just have to be smarter." "A tall order," Vesa said, though her grin was infectious. "But not impossible," Dern replied, determination in his voice. As the rust bucket sailed through the vast, indifferent expanse of space, its crew prepared for whatever lay ahead. They knew the universe was far from done with them, but they also knew that they were not done with it. With a bit of luck, a touch of cunning, and a whole lot of gallows humor, they'd face whatever cosmic cruelty came their way, refusing to let the universe have the last laugh. Captain Dern Rydell leaned against the wall in the rust bucket's tiny command center, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. The room smelled of burnt circuits and stale coffee, a cocktail of despair and caffeine. Vesa Kor was hunched over her console, fingers dancing like a pianist's in a horror opera. "So," Dern began, his voice a blend of dry sandpaper and old whiskey, "we've tricked the cosmic vacuum cleaner into chewing on our decoy. But this isn't over till the fat alien sings, right?" Vesa glanced up, her expression a mix of determination and the kind of resignation usually reserved for the doomed. "Yeah, and right now we've got two choices. Wait to become its cosmic dessert or take the fight to it. I vote option 2. Dern nodded, the kind of nod that said we're probably screwed, but hey, what else is new? "That means heading to the arena's core, doesn't it? Find something ancient we can use to swat this thing like a cosmic fly." "Exactly," Vesa replied, eyes flicking back to the screen where the decoy's energy signature pulsated like a heartbeat. "There's gotta be something in the arena's guts that can help us. It's old, and old usually means dangerous. Perfect for us." "Lovely," Dern said, pushing off the wall. "Who doesn't love a good walk through a deadly relic? Let's gear up. Adventure awaits, kids, and it's packing heat." They made their way to the rust bucket's cramped airlock, a place where optimism went to die. The rest of the crew, all 2 of them, gathered with expressions that ranged from "oh God, why me to is it too late to quit?" There was Marin, the ship's engineer, a middle-aged grump with a face like a sunburnt apple. He was busy adjusting his gear but looked up just long enough to grumble, "If this doesn't kill us all, it'll be a miracle." "And here's hoping no one's counting on divine intervention," Dern replied, slapping Marin's shoulder in what he hoped was a reassuring manner. The other crew member, a wiry pilot named Joss, was already suited up, checking the seals on his helmet. "So, we're taking a stroll into the cosmic funhouse. Should I pack my lucky socks or extra ammo?" "Both," Vesa said, strapping on her own gear. "Never know when you'll need to shoot your way out of a pair of unlucky socks." With a cacophony of clicks and hisses, they sealed their suits and prepared to disembark. The ship's airlock opened to reveal the arena, a sprawling labyrinth of twisted metal and forgotten technology. It loomed like the galaxy's most depressing theme park. "Right," Dern said, leading the way. "Let's find our ancient solution before our decoy gets a bad Yelp review." They trudged through the arena's corridors, the air heavy with the promise of impending doom. The passageways were a maze of rusted bulkheads and flickering lights, a place where the only welcome Matt Reed abandoned hope, all ye who enter. "So what's the plan?" Joss asked, his voice crackling over the comms. "We just wander around until we stumble over something useful. We're looking for the central control chamber," Vesa explained, consulting her handheld scanner. "If there's anything that can help us, it's going to be there, assuming the place doesn't collapse on us first." "Ah," Marin sighed, "a death trap with a plan, just what I signed up for." They pressed on, the sound of their boots echoing through the empty halls. The arena seemed to shift around them, an endless labyrinth that had no interest in playing fair. "Is it just me," Joss said, peering into the shadows, "or does it feel like we're being watched?" "Definitely not just you," Dern replied, keeping his grip tight on his blaster. "But hey, it's nice to feel wanted." Vesa's scanner beeped, a hopeful blip in the cosmic gloom. "Got something," she announced. "Looks like a power signature. Could be what we're looking for. Or just another thing waiting to kill us," Marin muttered. They followed Vesa's lead, descending deeper into the arena's bowels. The air grew colder, the metal walls closing in like a trap. "Feels like we're walking through a tomb," Joss said, eyes darting nervously. "Well, let's hope we don't end up permanent residents," Dern replied, his sarcasm a thin veil over his unease. The chamber they entered was vast, dominated by a control console that looked like it had been pulled straight from a mad scientist's fever dream. Wires and conduits snaked across the floor, pulsing with faint light. "Looks promising," Vesa said, approaching the console with the cautious optimism of a gambler eyeing a high-stakes table. "Promising like a loaded gun," Marin added, scanning the chamber for threats. "Dern, you want the honors?" Vesa asked, gesturing to the console. "Why not? If it explodes, I can say I went out with a bang," Dern said, stepping forward. He approached the console, its surface covered in runes and buttons that begged to be pressed. With a deep breath and a silent prayer to every cosmic deity that might be listening, Dern pressed what looked like the on button. The response was immediate. Lights flickered to life, and a hum of power surged through the room. A holographic interface appeared, hovering above the console, displaying symbols and readings that looked as unintelligible as the universe's tax forms. "Okay," Dern said. "Now what?" "Looks like it's some kind of control interface," Vesa said, her fingers moving a hair's breadth above the holograms. "If we can access the right systems, we might be able to trigger something. Like a big go-away sign for our cosmic friend?" Joss asked hopefully. "Something like that," Vesa replied. "But it's going to take some time to figure out the controls. These systems weren't exactly designed with user-friendliness in mind." "Yeah, ancient civilizations really needed better tech support," Dern said, watching as Vesa began to interact with the interface, each touch a tentative step into the unknown. As she worked, the room felt alive with potential energy, a coiled spring waiting to unleash its secrets. The hum of the systems was a low, constant presence, like the world's most ominous lullaby. "Anything I can do to help?" Marin asked, his skepticism giving way to a grudging curiosity. "Keep an eye out," Vesa said, not looking up from her work. "We don't know what's going to happen when we start poking around in here." "So, business as usual," Dern replied, keeping his blaster ready. The minutes dragged on, punctuated only by Vesa's quiet muttering and the occasional beep of success from the console. The atmosphere in the room was tense, a thin line between hope and disaster. "Got it," Vesa finally said, her voice triumphant. "I've accessed the primary systems. I think I can trigger an energy pulse from the arena's core. It should disrupt the entity's connection." "Great," Dern said, relief evident in his voice. "Let's light this candle and blow that thing to cosmic hell." "One problem," Vesa said, her tone cautious. The pulse is going to destabilize the whole area. We might have seconds to get clear once it's activated. Of course, Dern said with a weary grin. Because nothing's ever simple, so we set it and run like hell, Joss asked, looking between his crewmates. That's the gist of it, Vesa said. Get back to the rust bucket and pray it starts when we need it to. Praying to the machine gods again, are we? Marin said, a ghost of a smile on his lips. More like bargaining with the devil, Dern replied. Let's move. Vesa set the pulse trigger, a delicate dance of fingers across the console. The chamber's lights dimmed, and a low rumble echoed through the structure, as if the arena itself was waking from a long slumber. Triggers set, Vesa said, turning away from the console. We've got about 5 minutes before this place becomes a firework display. Then we better get moving, Dern said, leading the charge back the way they'd come. The corridors blurred past them as they sprinted back toward the rust bucket, each step a countdown to potential oblivion. The arena groaned ominously, its metal bones protesting their intrusion. Faster, folks, Dern shouted, the urgency in his voice matched by the pounding of their feet. They reached the airlock in record time, breathless and wired on adrenaline. The rust bucket loomed like a battered sentinel, its hull illuminated by the arena's flickering lights. Come on, Marin muttered, slamming his palm against the airlock controls. The doors hissed open and they piled inside, a rush of motion and frenzied energy. Dern secured the hatch, his heart pounding like a war drum. Vesa, get us the hell out of here, Dern barked, strapping himself into the pilot's seat. Already on it, Vesa replied, fingers flying over the ship's controls. The rust bucket shuddered to life, engines roaring like a beast awakened. The ship shot forward, speeding away from the arena as the pulse countdown ticked ever closer to zero. Outside, the arena's structure glowed ominously, a prelude to the chaos about to unfold. Brace yourselves, Dern warned, gripping the seat as the ship's engine strained against the sudden inertia. Then, with a force that made the universe seem to shiver, the arena erupted in a burst of energy, a wave of light and sound that radiated outward like a cosmic scream. The rust bucket rocked violently, its systems protesting the onslaught, but it held firm, driven by the sheer stubbornness of its crew and a little bit of luck. As the shockwave passed, the static interference that had haunted them faded, leaving only the steady hum of the ship's engines and the ragged breathing of its crew. Did we do it? Joss asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and awe. Looks like it, Vesa said, scanning the systems for any lingering threats. We've disrupted the entity's connection. It's gone. Well, Dern said, a grin spreading across his face, I guess dumb luck does have its moments. They sat there in the aftermath, adrenaline slowly ebbing away as the realization of their survival sank in. The rust bucket continued its journey through the stars, a testament to the resilience of its crew and the power of gallows humor. In the silence that followed, Dern looked at his crew, a ragtag bunch of misfits who'd just pulled off the impossible. They'd faced the universe's worst and lived to tell the tale, a story that would be retold with laughter and dark humor long into the future. All right, team, Dern said, his voice carrying a note of triumph. Let's head home. After all, we've got a hell of a story to share. With that, they turned the rust bucket toward the stars, ready for whatever came next. After all, in a universe that rarely played fair, they'd learned to make their own rules and write their own punchlines. The rust bucket's command center felt more cramped than usual. Maybe it was the atmosphere, thick with the kind of tension that could snap like a frayed wire. The screens blinked erratically, reflecting the crew's weariness and the fading hope that had kept them going. Dern Rydell stood leaning against a wall, the ship's familiar tang of burnt circuits and stale coffee a comfort. Not the comfort of a warm hug, mind you, more the comfort of a rusty nail you know won't kill you but might give you tetanus. So, the great plans hit a snag, huh? Joss leaned back in his chair, fingers twitching like a pianist warming up for a concerto of disaster. You could say that, Dern replied, scratching at the stubble on his chin. Turns out, Ancient tech isn't as reliable as the sales pitch suggested. Who would have thought? About as reliable as a politician's promise, Marin chimed in, his sunburnt apple face crinkling with a humorless grin. Vesa was hunched over her console, a picture of determined resignation. Her eyes darted across the screen, deciphering the garbled mess of signals and warnings. Something's using the arena's systems like a kid with a new toy, she muttered. And not in a good way. Fantastic, Dern said dryly. Our cosmic friends upgraded from sucking dust bunnies to playing God. As if on cue, the ship lurched, a violent shudder that set Dern's teeth on edge. The alarm system, which had seen more excitement than a soap opera protagonist, blared to life, suggesting either fire, imminent destruction, or both. Of course, Dern groaned, bracing himself against the wall, because things weren't complicated enough. You know, Joss piped up, trying to keep things light, I always dreamed of going out in a blaze of glory. Just didn't think it'd be as literal as this. Save the eulogies, Vesa snapped, her fingers flying over the outdated console with the dexterity of a pianist playing an out-of-tune piano. I've got our systems on life support, but we can't keep this up forever. Great, Dern said, sarcasm coating every syllable like a fine dusting of ash. So we're stuck in a haunted coliseum with a god-complex vacuum and a mutiny waiting to happen. Speaking of mutiny, Marin began, voice tinged with a hesitant edge, some of the crew are starting to ask if maybe it's time someone else took the helm. Dern gave a dry chuckle that tasted like scotch. Let me guess, someone like you, Marin shrugged, a movement that suggested both denial and the kind of resignation that comes from knowing you're stuck in the same leaky boat. Just passing along the message, Captain. Well, tell them they can have this chair when they pry it from my cold, dead backside, Dern shot back, his voice more bark than bite. Until then, we do things my way. The ship groaned again, a symphony of creaks and rattles that suggested it had opinions on the matter, none of them polite. Okay, genius ideas time, Dern said, looking at his crew. How do we fix this without becoming space debris? We might have a shot if we can stabilize the arena's core systems, Vesa suggested, not sounding particularly convinced. But there's a catch. Of course there is, Dern sighed. Give it to me straight. We'd need to physically reach the core and manually override the damage, Vesa explained. And given the state of things, that's about as easy as convincing a cat to take a bath. So, basically a suicide mission, Joss said, summing it up with his usual flair for the dramatic. Not necessarily, Vesa replied, a hint of defiance in her tone. But close enough. Marin rubbed his temples as if trying to massage away the headache this day had become. And here I thought signing up for this gig would be a nice, quiet retirement plan. Retirement in a casket, maybe, Dern quipped, straightening up. All right, let's saddle up. We've got an arena to fix. As they suited up, the underlying tension among the crew simmered just under the surface. Dern could feel it, an unspoken question hanging in the recycled air. Was this the end of the line? You know, Joss said as they made their way to the airlock, trying for levity, if we survive this, drinks are on me. If we survive this, Vesa shot back, I might just take up knitting. Sounds less hazardous. The corridors of the rust bucket felt endless, a labyrinth of metal and wire as they headed toward the exit. Each step echoed with the weight of uncertainty, and the irony that their best shot at survival lay in the heart of a place designed by a species long gone and possibly insane. The arena loomed ahead, its structure a ghostly silhouette against the backdrop of space. Entering it felt like stepping into the maw of some ancient beast, a place where hope went to die. You know, Dern said as they entered the vast, echoing chamber, I always dreamed of going on an adventure. This isn't quite what I had in mind. Really, Marin said, aiming for humor but landing somewhere around cynical. Thought this was exactly what you wanted, Captain. Yeah, well, Dern replied, be careful what you wish for and all that. They moved through the arena, the path twisting and turning like the plot of a bad soap opera. Every shadow seemed to shift with malevolence, every sound magnified by the silence. Reaching the core was easier said than done. The damage was extensive. Conduits ripped open like the guts of some mechanical beast, wires sparking with the promise of imminent disaster. "This is it," Vesa said, eyeing the chaotic mess of technology with the kind of dubious respect usually reserved for high explosives and bad art. "Looks like a Sunday puzzle," Joss commented, eyes scanning the room. "One wrong piece and the whole thing comes crashing down." "Well then," Dern said, clapping his hands together with mock enthusiasm, "let's try not to break anything important." Marin snorted. "I think we passed important about 3 corridors back. Now we're looking at desperately necessary." Vesa got to work, her focus unwavering even as the ship continued to shudder around them. Her hands moved with precision, pulling wires, adjusting conduits. Each action held the weight of necessity, the stakes higher than any they'd faced before. "How's it going?" Dern asked, hovering like a nervous parent at a school recital. "About as well as you'd expect," Vesa replied. "Almost done. Just need there." With a final, decisive tug, the core system's whirred to life, the arena lighting up like a Christmas tree from hell. "Did it work?" Joss asked, hope tempered by the kind of pragmatism that only comes from prolonged exposure to disappointment. "Systems are stable," Vesa confirmed, her relief evident. "For now, anyway." "Well, it's a start," Dern said, offering a grin that was more grimace than anything else. "Let's get back before our luck runs out." Retracing their steps was a race against time, the arena's structural integrity as questionable as a dodgy second-hand spaceship. Each creak and groan felt personal, as if the place itself resented their intrusion. "Almost there," Marin said, the relief in his voice barely concealed. But of course the universe had other plans. A tremor ran through the arena, a warning that their time was up. "Move, move, move," Dern shouted, urgency driving his steps. This was not the place to admire the architecture. They reached the airlock with seconds to spare, the rust bucket waiting like a tired old dog ready to go home. The doors slid open, welcoming them back to the relative safety of their beleaguered vessel. "Close call," Joss said, breathless but smiling. "I think I lost a few years back there." "Join the club," Marin replied, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and relief. With everyone aboard, Dern took his place at the helm, a seat that felt like home despite its ragged edges and questionable cushioning. "Let's get the hell out of here," he said, setting the coordinates for anywhere but here. With a final, defiant roar, the rust bucket launched from the arena, leaving behind a monument to the madness of ancient civilizations and the stubbornness of its own crew. "Well," Dern said, glancing at his crew, "we're not dead yet. Let's keep it that way." The cosmic vacuum cleaner, now deprived of its playground, faded into the background of the universe, a problem for another day, another story. For now, the rust bucket and her crew sailed through the stars, battered but unbeaten, a testament to human stubbornness and the resilience of those who refuse to quit. "Drinks are still on me," Joss said, settling into his seat with a grin. "Damn right they are," Dern replied, leaning back as the stars stretched out before them, each one a reminder that, against all odds, they were still here. The rust bucket's command center was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that made Dern want to check over his shoulder to see if death was sneaking up on him with a knife. He leaned against the wall, comforted by the persistent whiff of burnt circuits and stale coffee that told him he was still alive, for now. "Okay, folks," Dern said, addressing his motley crew. "Looks like we dodged the universe's attempt to turn us into cosmic confetti, but we've still got a vacuum cleaner with delusions of grandeur to deal with." "Ideas?" Vesa was hunched over her console, the outdated machine barely able to keep up with the demands she was placing on it. Her fingers flew across the keys, but her mind was clearly elsewhere, lost in some tangled web of impossible solutions. "I might have something," she muttered, not looking up. "Care to share, or are you planning to take that information to the grave?" Marin quipped, his sunburnt apple face managing a wry grin despite the circumstances. Vesa gave him a withering look. the kind that spoke volumes. I discovered a hidden chamber in the arena schematics. It wasn't on any of the official records, probably because whoever built that place was either a genius or a lunatic. Maybe both. A hidden chamber. Joss leaned back in his chair, fingers twitching like a pianist ready to play his last symphony. Sounds like a setup for a horror movie. What's in it? A prototype device, Vesa replied, her tone suggesting she wasn't entirely convinced by her own words. Something that might be able to interact with our cosmic friend. Dern raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. What kind of interaction are we talking about? Tea and biscuits or a swift kick in the rear? More like a slap upside the head, Vesa said, a hint of a smile creeping onto her face. It's risky and untested, which is pretty much a theme for us at this point. Sounds like just our kind of crazy, Dern said, his enthusiasm a shade more manic than he intended. All right, team. Let's see if we can turn this prototype into our ticket out of this mess. Marin rubbed his temples, attempting to muster some focus from the chaos of the day. And how exactly do we plan on doing that? Our ingenuity seems to have left the building. Not entirely, Joss replied, a mischievous glint in his eye. We might be able to tweak it using some good old-fashioned human improvisation. You know, duct tape and questionable ethics. Dern chuckled, the sound as dry as his humor. That's the spirit. If we're going down, we'll go down with style. The team's mood shifted, the hopelessness that had clung to them like a bad smell dissipating slightly. Hope wasn't exactly in abundance, but stubborn determination was, and sometimes that was enough. All right, Vesa, Dern said, clapping his hands together with forced optimism. Show us this secret chamber and let's see what we're dealing with. Vesa led the way, guiding them through the rust bucket's tangled innards until they reached the arena again. The place was as welcoming as a shark-infested swimming pool, but for once, they had a purpose. The hidden chamber was tucked away behind a series of confusing passages, as if designed by someone who'd heard of logic but decided to ignore it. When they finally arrived, it was with a mix of relief and trepidation. Well, this is cozy, Marin said, taking in the cramped space filled with arcane-looking machinery and more buttons than seemed reasonable. Feels like a claustrophobic's worst nightmare. Let's just hope it doesn't come with the matching horror show, Joss added, eyeing the prototype device with a blend of curiosity and suspicion. The device itself looked about as trustworthy as a used car salesman at a convention for kleptomaniacs. It was a hodgepodge of wires and gleaming panels, the whole thing humming with potential and possible disaster. Okay, genius, Dern said, nodding to Vesa. What's the plan? We need to modify the device, Vesa explained, her voice steady as she ran through the possibilities in her mind. Use our systems to bridge the technology gap, make it something the cosmic vacuum can't ignore. And what are the odds it'll blow up in our faces? Marin asked, only half joking. Pretty high, I'd say, Vesa replied honestly. But given our track record, I'd say that's par for the course. Fantastic, Joss said, rubbing his hands together. I always wanted to see how many ways we could potentially meet our maker. With a shared look of grim determination, they set to work. It was a task that required not just skill, but a willingness to embrace the kind of insanity that only came from a lifetime of questionable decisions. Vesa took the lead, directing the others with the precision of a conductor guiding an orchestra composed of loud, unruly instruments. As she worked, the others fell in line, bringing their own particular brand of genius or madness to the table. Marin handled the wiring, his steady hands ensuring that nothing short-circuited or exploded prematurely. Joss was in charge of the coding, his fingers a blur as he adapted the arena's ancient technology to their needs. Dern supervised with a careful eye, ready to step in should anything start to go sideways. All the while, he kept up a running commentary, his humor as dark and dry as a desert at midnight. This is either going to save us, Dern said, leaning over to inspect the progress, or create a new crater visible from the next galaxy over. Let's hope for the former, Vesa replied, her attention fixed on the device. I'm not in the mood for interstellar landscaping. The Iors bled together as they worked, the relentless ticking of time an ever-present reminder of just how precarious their situation was. But instead of despair, there was a kind of reckless enthusiasm in the air, a willingness to laugh in the face of certain doom. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably just a very long day, they stepped back to admire, or perhaps fear, their creation. The device hummed to life, a testament to their unyielding stubbornness and a touch of luck. "Well, it hasn't exploded yet," Joss remarked, a grin stretching across his face. "I'd call that a win." "Don't jinx it," Marin warned, though he too wore a smile. "We still have to see if it actually works." "One step at a time," Dern said, his voice firm but tinged with pride. "Let's get this thing in place and see if we can't wrangle ourselves an overgrown vacuum cleaner." They moved with purpose, carrying the device through the labyrinthine corridors of the arena. Despite the weight of their task, there was a newfound energy among them, a belief in their ability to pull off the impossible. As they reached the core of the arena, the place where their fate would be decided, Dern took a moment to address the team. "All right, folks, this is it. Let's show that cosmic sucker what humans are made of." "Stupidity and caffeine," Joss suggested, earning an eye roll from Vesa. "Creativity and a complete disregard for self-preservation," Marin countered, adjusting the device with careful hands. The mood was lighter now, the oppressive weight of their situation dissipating in the face of their shared camaraderie. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, a fact that brought a measure of comfort amid the chaos. Vesa positioned the device, fingers dancing over the controls as she made last-minute adjustments. With a final nod, she stepped back, allowing the others to assume their positions. In the tense silence that followed, Dern found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here, a series of improbable events that could only be described as an ongoing disaster with brief moments of inspiration. "Ready?" Vesa asked, her voice cutting through his thoughts. "As we'll ever be," Dern replied, taking a steadying breath. "Let's do this." With a flick of a switch, the device activated, its hum rising to a crescendo as it engaged with the arena systems. The air crackled with energy, a sense of anticipation filling the chamber as the device began its work. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly but surely, the arena responded, the ancient technology coming to life with a reluctant groan. "It's working," Vesa said, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. "It's actually working." "Keep an eye on those readings," Dern instructed, his own disbelief tempered by the hope that they might just pull this off. As the device continued to interact with the arena, the cosmic vacuum cleaner, somewhere out there in the vastness of space, began to respond. It was a subtle change at first, but it was enough to suggest that they had indeed gotten its attention. "All right, team," Dern said, his voice steady. "Let's see if we can teach that thing to play nice." The crew watched as the device did its thing, the hum of energy growing until it filled the chamber with a sense of something monumental, a feeling that was both thrilling and terrifying. Pressure mounted, the weight of their gamble pressing down on them with the force of 1,000 suns. But even in the face of impending disaster, there was a shared certainty among them, a belief in their ability to achieve the impossible. As the device's energy reached its peak, the arena's systems responded in kind. The air shimmered and the ground beneath them trembled, as if the very fabric of reality was being tested. "Hold steady," Dern ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. Almost there, and then with a final surge of power the device fulfilled its purpose. The arena's system stabilized, the energy dissipating as suddenly as it had appeared. Silence followed, the kind of silence that held the universe breathless. And in that moment, something shifted, a presence that had loomed over them fading into nothingness. "Did we do it?" Joss asked, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. "I think we did," Vesa replied, her expression one of stunned triumph. "The vacuum cleaner's gone, or at least it's not our problem anymore." A cheer went up among the crew, a sound of victory and relief, a testament to human perseverance and the power of collective insanity. "Well," Dern said, leaning back with a grin. "Looks like we've saved the galaxy for another day. Drinks are definitely on you, Joss." Yeah, Joss said, his grin wider than a black hole. "But you're all paying the tip." As they made their way back to the rust bucket, the crew walked with a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced the darkness and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. "Think we'll get some downtime now?" Marin asked, his tone hopeful. "With our luck," Dern replied, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Not a chance. But at least we'll face whatever comes next with a good story to tell." And with that they returned to their ship, ready to face whatever the universe had in store for them next. Because if there was one thing they knew for certain, it was this: they were not dead yet. And as long as they were still breathing, they'd keep fighting, keep laughing, and keep pushing the boundaries of what was possible. In the end, it was the only way they knew how to live. The rust bucket creaked and groaned like a grumpy old man waking up from a nap, but it was music to their ears. The team was back on board, the modified device humming away like it had ambitions of becoming the galaxy's most overqualified paperweight. Dern leaned against the command center wall, his usual perch, the familiar tang of the ship's recycled air filling his lungs. "Well, we've done it," Vesa said, collapsing into her chair with the grace of a brick collapsing into a bucket. Her console flickered, still struggling to keep pace like an asthmatic kid at a marathon. "For now, anyway." "Yeah, until the universe finds another way to try and kill us," Marin added, his face a crumpled map of sunburnt lines and cynical amusement. "Hope it brings something new. I'm getting tired of the same old death threats." Dern chuckled, a sound like gravel being crushed under a boot. "Maybe next time it'll be a toaster with delusions of grandeur instead of a cosmic vacuum cleaner." Joss, ever the optimist, or maybe just too stubbornly curious for his own good, glanced at the readings. "At least our toaster didn't blow up. That's a win I can drink to." "Only because Vesa was leading the charge," Dern corrected, eyeing the prototype device that now seemed more familiar than frightening. "Hell of a gamble, but I'd place that bet again." Vesa waved off the compliment, her focus on the console like a hawk watching a particularly fat mouse. "Let's not break our arms patting ourselves on the back just yet. We've only scared it off, not sent it packing." "Optimism, Vesa," Joss said, flashing a grin that was all teeth and no sense. "It might actually rub off on you someday." "I'm saving that for when hell freezes over," she replied with a smirk, her fingers tapping out a rhythm of assurance on the ancient controls. As they worked, the ship's systems rattled back to a semblance of normal, the faint alarm tones a comforting background noise. It was an orchestra of dysfunction they were used to, a soundtrack to their lives of cosmic chaos and questionable decisions. "Think we actually managed to communicate with it?" Marin asked, his voice a mixture of hope and incredulity. "I mean, we did convince it to back off." Dern shrugged, the gesture a perfect mix of confidence and hell if I know. "Maybe it's just tired of us as much as we're tired of it. Or maybe it found another cosmic dust bunny to chase. Or it realized we're not worth the effort," Vesa suggested dryly, adjusting the device with a deft touch. "We're like those snacks you try once and never buy again." "Speaking of snacks, when's the last time any of us ate something that wasn't just caffeine in solid form?" Joss asked, a reminder that while they could solve existential threats, basic human needs had a way of sneaking up on you. "Who needs food when you've got adrenaline?" Marin countered, though his stomach growled its own protest. "Besides, I heard stress is a great diet." The command center, cramped and filled with air that had the unsettling flavor of burnt toast, felt oddly cozy as they continued their work. Each beep and crackle of the consoles was a reminder they were still alive, still fighting the odds, still sharing this absurd journey. "Let's not get too comfortable," Dern said, though the relief in his voice betrayed him. "No doubt there's something else out there that wants a piece of us." "Like what?" Vesa asked, not looking up from her console. "Evil cosmic coffee machine. Now there's a thought," Dern replied with mock seriousness. Probably wondering why it's been stuck brewing our sludge for so long. Maybe it's planning to unionize, Joss added with a grin. Demands include actually making coffee that doesn't taste like despair. If it manages that, I'll welcome our new caffeinated overlords, Marin said, raising an imaginary cup in a toast to their hypothetical doom. As they bantered, the device on the console hummed a steady, reassuring tune, its job of stabilizing the arena's systems complete for now. The ancient technology had been less of a challenge than their own ingenuity, and as much as they hated to admit it, they'd managed a truce with the mysterious entity. "Looks like we've temporarily pacified our interstellar Hoover," Vesa said, running a final check. "Let's hope it doesn't come back with an appetite for revenge." "Or for us," Marin added, crossing his fingers with a grin. "Wouldn't mind some downtime that doesn't involve nearly dying." The ship's lights flickered, a reminder that the rust bucket was as temperamental as ever. But instead of dread, it brought a smile to Dern's face. He'd take a quirky bucket of bolts over polished perfection any day. "All right, team," Dern said, his voice carrying the weight of a brief but hard-earned victory. "Let's make sure everything's squared away before we start celebrating. No use tempting fate more than we already have." "Agreed," Vesa said, though there was a lightness in her tone that hadn't been there before. "I'd like to stay alive long enough to see what other ridiculous situations we can get ourselves into." Joss gave a mock salute. "Here's to seeing how many more ways the universe can try and kill us." "At least it keeps things interesting," Marin said, standing with a wince as his joints popped in protest. "Boring's never been our style." They went about their tasks with a sense of camaraderie that came from shared near-death experiences and a mutual understanding that the universe was a strange and often unkind place. But despite everything, they were still here, still standing, or sitting in Vesa's case, and still ready to face whatever came next. "Do you think it'll ever get easier?" Joss asked, half serious, as he checked the ship's systems for anomalies. Dern shrugged, a gesture that was becoming his trademark. "Wouldn't count on it." "But then again, easy isn't really our thing, is it?" "Nope," Vesa agreed, her smile matching the dry humor in her voice. "But I'd like to think we've got a knack for making the impossible seem only mildly suicidal." "Nice to know we've got a reputation to uphold," Marin said, his face a roadmap of humor and the occasional burn. "Hopefully one that doesn't end with us as cosmic roadkill." The rust bucket's engines rumbled as they set a course away from the arena, leaving behind the remnants of ancient civilizations and cosmic threats. It was another chapter in their story, one they'd tell with laughter and more than a little exaggeration when the time came. And as they watched the stars slide by, the crew of the rust bucket knew that whatever awaited them in the endless expanse of space, they'd face it with the same mix of courage, insanity, and a healthy dose of snark that had brought them this far. They were, after all, only human, imperfect, irreverent, and somehow, despite the odds, still alive, which was more than they could say for most days. "So," Dern said, breaking the brief silence with a conspiratorial glance at his crew, "who's up for another round of let's see if we survive?" Marin snorted, leaning back with a look of mock contemplation. "I dunno, Dern. I'm starting to think you're just in it for the thrill." "Maybe," Dern admitted, the corners of his mouth twitching upwards. "Or maybe I just can't resist a good story." Joss grinned, tapping a finger on the console. "Better than any soap opera, that's for sure." "And with fewer stabbings," Vesa added, though the glint in her eye suggested she wasn't entirely serious. With the universe outside and their makeshift family inside, the crew of the rust bucket knew one thing for certain. As long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't handle, or at least, nothing they couldn't laugh about later. And with that thought, they settled into the rhythm of space travel, ready for whatever new insanity awaited them just around the corner. The rust bucket limped through space with all the grace of a one-legged ostrich in a windstorm. The creaking, rattling, and occasional alarming shudder were familiar companions to the crew. As Captain Dern Rydell surveyed the command center, He couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for the old ship. It had survived more than its fair share of cosmic nonsense, much like them. "Well, we're still in one piece," Dern said, leaning against his favored section of wall. He did it with the kind of confidence that came from knowing the wall wouldn't betray him. Yet, Vesa Kor, still hunched over her console as if she might bend it to her will through sheer determination, snorted. "In one piece, sure. Held together by hope and duct tape, but one piece." Marin, wearing his usual expression of sunburnt cynicism, glanced around. "Hope and duct tape sounds like a solid business plan." Joss, forever the optimist or masochist, depending on the day, looked up from his readings. "Hey, we've been through worse. Remember that time with the laser sharks?" "Laser sharks?" Vesa groaned. "I'd almost managed to block that out." "Dern, you owe us a vacation somewhere that doesn't involve dodging death every other hour," Marin pointed out, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen enough of the universe to know that it usually wanted to kill him. "Sure," Dern replied, deadpan. "Right after we've finished not dying from whatever this was." He gestured vaguely at the universe in general, as if it were a particularly disappointing student in need of a stern talking to. "Speaking of not dying," Joss interjected, "the prototype device seems to be holding up. Arena's systems are stable for now." "Nice to know something's staying stable," Vesa said, tapping her console with the kind of affection one might reserve for a particularly troublesome pet. "Unlike our sanity. That ship sailed a long time ago," Marin noted with a grin which looked more like a wolf baring its teeth. "But hey, we're alive. Might as well enjoy it." As they settled into the rhythm of post-crisis normality, the command center's usual symphony of clinks and clanks played on. It was almost comforting if you were the sort who found comfort in chaos. The universe, however, wasn't quite done with them. The console beeped, an insistent little noise that demanded attention like a toddler with a new drum set. "Incoming transmission," Vesa reported, her fingers dancing over the keys. "From Earth." "Earth," Dern echoed, eyebrows raised. "What do they want? Did we forget to pay our cosmic tax?" "Maybe they've heard of our new interstellar vacuum cleaner deterrent service," Marin suggested, smirking. "Prices starting at 1 sanity point per job." Vesa patched the transmission through, and a voice crackled to life amidst the static. "This is Admiral Clark of the United Earth Fleet. Captain Rydell, congratulations on your recent escapade. We've monitored the situation and wanted to extend our recognition of your actions." "We're being recognized?" Joss asked, incredulous. "Is this real life, or just fantasy?" Marin quipped, completing the reference with a waggle of the eyebrows. "Stuck in a cosmic landslide," Vesa murmured, shaking her head. The Admiral's voice continued, full of the kind of gravitas that came with a life of giving orders and having them occasionally followed. "Your efforts have given us hope for future exploration. We're authorizing you for continued reconnaissance and salvage operations. Earth is counting on you." The line went dead with a finality that suggested Admiral Clark had better things to do. "Like not being stuck in a rickety space bucket." "Well," Dern said, breaking the stunned silence that followed, "looks like we're the universe's new favorite court jesters." "Does that mean we get fancy hats?" Marin asked, looking far too delighted at the prospect. "Only if they come with hazard pay," Vesa replied, tapping a few more commands into her console. "And a lifetime supply of aspirin." "So, what's next on our grand tour of Please Don't Kill Us?" Joss asked, clearly eager to get back to the business of tempting fate. "First, we assess the damage," Dern said, with all the enthusiasm of a man suggesting dental surgery. "Then we figure out where we're headed next. Preferably somewhere that doesn't involve sentient cleaning appliances." The crew busied themselves with the tasks of making sure the rust bucket wouldn't catastrophically fail before they had a chance to make more bad decisions. Marin was muttering to himself about recalibrating the engines, while Vesa's focus remained glued to the console, hands moving with the precision of a concert pianist with stage fright. "I'll give it this," Marin said, testing his tools against a particularly stubborn panel. The ship may be a piece of junk, but it's our piece of junk. And it's got character, Joss added, which was a polite way of saying it had more quirks than a conspiracy theorist at a UFO sighting. As Vesa worked her magic, or something akin to it, the ship began to comply, however reluctantly. Systems ticked back into life, each section lighting up like a Christmas tree on a budget. "Looks like we're stable," Vesa announced, though her voice held all the enthusiasm of announcing a paper cut. "For now." "Good," Dern said, pushing himself off the wall to make a slow circuit of the command center. "Now we just have to decide where not to get killed next. Got any suggestions from Earth?" Marin asked, his eyebrows a pair of playful question marks. "Nothing concrete," Dern replied. "Just keep an eye out for trouble. Never been a problem for us," Joss said with the kind of optimism that bordered on delusional. "Trouble seems to have a crush on us." "A crush?" Vesa chuckled. "More like a fatal attraction." They mulled over their options, such as they were. Despite, or perhaps because of the chaos, there was a strange sense of calm in the command center. They'd faced the universe's latest attempt to sideline them and come out the other side. For now, that was enough. "So," Marin said, breaking the silence with a grin that was less a smile and more a statement. "Where are we off to next?" Dern considered. There was a whole galaxy out there, filled with places that probably wanted them dead and things that might succeed. But they had each other, and maybe that was enough to make even the darkest corners of space feel a little less lonely. "Let's aim for somewhere with less homicidal home appliances," he suggested. "Preferably somewhere with a beach." "A beach?" Vesa asked, arching an eyebrow. "In space? Hey, if we can face down a cosmic vacuum cleaner, I'm sure we can find a beach," Dern said, finding it hard not to smile at the absurdity of it all. "Beach or bust," Joss declared with a salute that was only half in jest. "Though knowing our luck, it'll be waterlogged with more than just H2O. And probably radioactive," Marin added cheerfully. "But think of the tan," Vesa said, her sarcasm as sharp as the edge of a cracked plate. With a course set for parts unknown, the crew of the Rust Bucket settled into their routine. It was a routine built on layers of sarcasm, bad coffee, and the occasional life-threatening incident. But it worked for them, and that was all that mattered. As the stars streaked by, the command center took on a cozy atmosphere. Cozy in the way that a haunted house might be considered charming. The recycled air was familiar, the seats were uncomfortable in just the right way, and the promise of future disasters loomed like an old friend. "Whatever happens next," Dern said, folding his arms and looking around at his crew, his family really, in the way only shared trauma and bad jokes could make them. "We face it together." "Together," Vesa echoed, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken promises. "I'm in." "Me too," Joss said, his grin wide and genuine, the kind that suggested he hadn't quite realized just how far gone they all were. "Wouldn't miss it," Marin added, his voice rough with the kind of affection he'd never admit to outright. And so they flew on, the Rust Bucket a tiny speck in the vastness of space, carrying its crew towards their next adventure, disaster, or probably both. But whatever awaited them, they'd face it with the same irreverence and stubbornness that had carried them this far. Because in the end, it wasn't about the destination. It was about the journey. Even if that journey involved a lot of snark, questionable life choices, and the occasional existential threat. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.